Love that music. It means it's election season in Oklahoma. Dave Morris here from the Oklahoman's video studio. Joined tonight in studio with my colleagues, Ben Felder, Dell Dunwalt right here, and Kayla Branch, who's interning with us this summer. She's handling the social media and the number aspects of our live hits tonight, including some candidate and voter interviews that she conducted earlier today. We'll have live updates throughout tonight at 8, 9, 10 o'clock, or as long as is needed. We're going to lead off with Brian Dean, who joins us on the phone from the State Election Board. Brian, how are you this evening?
We're doing good.
You know, when I last spoke with you was probably back in April, and at that point it was the filing period, and you suggested at that point we would see a record number of candidates to file. That turned out to be the case. Did that translate into lots of people going to the polls today?
Well, you know, we'll know for certain, tonight as results start, coming in, and we could get a clearer picture of just how many folks have come out to vote. But if you look at what we saw during early voting and what we saw from our mail votes, I mean, we're well ahead of pace of what we saw 4 years ago. Both Republicans and Democrats had higher numbers. In fact, I think Democrats were more than double the number they got 4 years ago in early voting. So the numbers are certainly encouraging, and our voter registration numbers have been up. So you take all those things together, and it's certainly encouraging. We're certainly hopeful that we're going to see pretty good turnout today.
Brian, across the state, what was the feedback today? Were there any problems?
There are always little issues that come up. In every election. I know we had a precinct in Tulsa early this morning that the poll workers got there and their key didn't work to open up the door. And so they contacted the county election board, and they put their heads together, and one of the poll workers pulled their pickup up, and they put the tailgate down, and they started getting voters through and casting ballots out the back of the pickup. And that is good poll worker ingenuity, and that's the kind of thing that we really are proud of our poll workers for making sure that people get in and get their votes counted.
I'm not sure there's anything more Oklahoma than pulling up the pickup and casting ballots there. So, and to your point, good ingenuity and keeping things going. Brian, I want to ask you one thing I saw on social media today. Some people were saying they didn't get both ballots with the state question, perhaps being on a separate ballot. Any thoughts on that from what you heard?
We got some calls and some questions from the media about that, and so I did talk to most of our county election board secretaries in our larger counties, and we did not have any widespread issues of people being denied ballots or anything of that nature. We did have some issues, it sounds like, where there were some poll workers early in the morning who were asking people if they wanted the nonpartisan ballot, which had the state question on it, rather than just issuing those ballots to everyone. And as the counties, when they started getting some reports of that, they immediately contacted their poll workers and followed up and got everybody on the right page. So, generally speaking, things were pretty good today. It's always a challenge when you're putting on a statewide election, and we work long hours, and so nothing's ever perfect. And so, with the main thing, and what we've told people all day long is if they have problems at their polling place, if they see anything that doesn't look right, if they think they're not getting a ballot they need to call the county election board as soon as possible so they can get that rectified and get it dealt with. So, we can't fix an issue unless someone lets us know about it. So, that's the main thing is we want to get those things fixed, and there are going to be hiccups, and we just want to try to make sure they get fixed as soon as we can.
Brian, something you mentioned off the top of this interview before we let you go, you mentioned that you'll know more as the results come in about voter turnout. What is the process at this point for some people who may not know of when these votes become official and sort of the timeline from here?
Sure. Just looking right now, we've got about 340 of 1,951 precincts that are reporting. Generally speaking, what we see first are the absentee and early voting numbers, because the counties have, they generally have, many of them have already gotten all those run through the machines and everything, and so it's just a matter of plugging in those results from the machines and getting them tallied. And the poll workers, they've got to get everybody through who is in line at 7 o'clock. Then they have to close the polls down. The precinct inspector has, they have to drive back with the ballots and the machine, which are locked and sealed, and then bring those in. And the county election board then has to open those up and count them during their public meeting. So it takes a little longer for those to start coming in. But we do have some results coming in already from some of the precincts. So, those will continue. And, hopefully we should have the bulk of those in by about 9 or 9:30 or so. And then we'll have a few that will just have to trickle in late. And that's always, there's always a few precincts that take a while longer to get in. So,
chatting with Brian Dean from the State Election Board. Brian, I'll let you go on this. We mentioned the pickup truck and the voting, but is there anything more Oklahoma and American than the I voted sticker? People love these, and it seems like this iconic image hasn't changed, but it almost has a second life with social media. People love their selfies and the stickers. What's interesting is we came across an article a while back that was in a trade publication for election administrators from the 1970s. The I voted sticker was apparently invented in Oklahoma. So there's one for the books. When you say it can't be more Oklahoma, I think we actually invented it, and people do love those stickers. And I vote absentee, and so I don't get a sticker. And I know some people they want to go to their polling place just for the sticker. So I certainly get that. Although I will tell you, it's great and it's very convenient to vote by mail as well. Brian Dean, bringing it home with a solid Oklahoma reference there with the I voted sticker. Sir, as always, we appreciate your time. Good job today, and we'll let you go. All right. Thank you, guys. You have a good one. Brian Dean from the State Election Board. And at this point, we'll turn it over to Kayla Branch, who has been following some of the numbers. And as Brian alluded to, we have some results coming in. We do indeed. For the Republican candidates for governor, right now we have Mitt Cornett in the lead with 26% of the votes, closely followed by Todd Lamb with 25% and Kevin Stitt with 24%. For the Democratic candidates for governor, we have Drew Edmondson in the lead. He's got 65% of the votes, followed by Connie Johnson with 34%. There were only two of them. And I think the third most important and popular thing people were voting on today was the state question. Right now we've got 54% that are for the proposal, and we've got 45%, almost 46% that are against it. Also in studio, as we mentioned off the top here, Ben Felder, Dell Denwald, some analysis of what you heard there from Kayla. Ben, I'll start with you. Yeah, so those results, Kayla's right. I mean, the governor's race, the GOP side is what everyone's focused on, that along with the medical marijuana state question. And what we kind of thought might be the case seems to be shaping out as we have, still less than a third of the vote turnout in. Let's start with the GOP race. We thought, the big three, Stitt, Lamb, Cornett, it was going to be between them. We thought it'd be close, and it seems to be pretty tight. One thing to keep in mind for Cornett, the former Oklahoma City Mayor Mitt Cornett, he's expected to do well, needs to do well in the Oklahoma City media market. We're still waiting on returns to come in Oklahoma County. Our Chris Castile, who's been sharing updates that he's seen that are coming out of neighboring counties like Canadian and Cleveland County, some big suburbs, a lot of Republican voters. He seems to be doing really well right there. So he's going to want to continue that theme here in Oklahoma City and pick up, it's going to be tough in Tulsa, that's Stitt's territory. But right now a really tight race, and one of those three is going to be on the outside looking in after tonight. And then the state question. I mean, for the last few months we've been saying that polls seem to show that there's favorable support for medical marijuana. The last couple of weeks we've seen really intense opposition ads. Once again, we still have to see most of the results come in, but right out of the gate, when you look at the precincts that are already reporting, Oklahomans, by a 10-point margin, which is pretty significant, are so far supporting that medical marijuana. Our colleague who spent many a day out at the state capitol, Dell, some of your thoughts.
Right, so I think one thing that might be a little bit surprising is how many points Mitt Cornett has over Lamb and Stitt. I know a couple of months ago, they were a little bit closer together. I think the last poll that we saw, it was a statistical dead heat. If Mitt Cornett is going to carry himself, several points ahead of the second place person on that runoff ballot, it shows that he had a pretty good ground game going into this primary election. One thing to remember, this is the 8 o'clock update. It's still really early, and the results across the state are not ultimately indicative of what could eventually happen. Oklahoma voters don't vote in a uniform way. Oklahoma City votes differently from Tulsa, votes differently from rural areas. And so as these results come in, you could see numbers shift wildly you could see candidates who were down suddenly find themselves on top. And if you want to talk about it right now, I've been looking at early returns for House members, and really it shows that we have several House members who could lose their seats tonight or be forced into a runoff. I've counted 14 who fit that description. Travis Dunlap, Kevin McDougal is right teetering on the edge. George Fott, also with just 51% of the votes so far. Greg Babinek only has 23%. He's an incumbent. One of his challengers, James Thomas Talley, is getting close to 50%, and he could take the Republican nomination tonight if he gets over 50. There were 3 lawmakers I profiled who were the target of a dark money super PAC campaign: Sean Roberts, Chuck Strom, Mike Ritz. Each of those are lower. They're struggling right now in early voting. Sean Roberts 27%, Chuck Strom 35%, Mike Ritz 35%. Several other lawmakers, mostly Republican because not many Democrats were challenged in their seats, but several Republicans could find themselves without a job.
And Ben, Dale mentions the word runoff. The mechanics here are, even looking at the GOP race, if you don't get the 50%, there's a runoff, correct?
50% plus 1 is going to mean an August.
Two candidates.
Yeah, it's going to mean
only
an August,
the top 2 candidates,
August
right?
runoff. And Dale's going through the list of incumbents, and a lot of incumbents are getting challenged this year. The fact that even just a couple incumbents lose their seat, that's kind of historic. The last several election cycles, I mean, the power of the incumbency has been pretty strong in Oklahoma, as it is across the nation. So if you have even just a couple of those incumbents fall, or even move to a runoff, I mean, that's pretty big news. And here we have a full slate that are, probably a little bit concerned as they're seeing the results come in. And I think that it speaks to a couple things. We talked about the high turnout. Almost 800 candidates are running this year. I mean, this is a year, the last few years we've seen voter frustration towards the legislature and state government continue to grow. This is a year where teachers shut down schools for 2 weeks. I mean, this is an unusual political year. And I'm just looking at the state superintendent, Joy Hoffmeister, who has dramatically outraised her 2 challengers, and she's at 46%. I mean, there's still, with just about 25% or 30% of the results are in, so there's still a ways to go. And as Dale says, it depends on what the geography is reporting at this point. But I mean, that's surprising. So this is going to be, I think we're going to see some interesting storylines from tonight because 2018 in Oklahoma right now is not your typical election year.
One thing you said, Ben, you said these candidates might be surprised at the election returns so far. If they're surprised by this turnout, then they shouldn't have been surprised. Basically, they're not paying attention to their district, and I guess we'll see. On the superintendent of education, Joy Hoffmeister, I'm wondering if people think that they're voting for the comedian Will Ferrell.
Well, and that's a great. I'm looking at this. And like I said, there's still the most of the votes still have to come in, and we haven't seen Oklahoma County and some other big areas. But Joy Hoffmeister, yes, there's been a lot of frustration towards education. She was expected to win, and I think is expected to get first place tonight. But she is, a lot of people feel like she did a pretty good job of aligning herself with teachers during the walkout. Maybe that's turned her off to some Republican voters who were a little frustrated and saw her maybe aligning with the union. She never endorsed the walkout outright. But you're right, Will Ferrell, a candidate who put almost no money into this campaign and put no ground game, has 23% of the vote. And once again, maybe it's from an area of the state where he's from on the Tulsa side. But that's significant. And I guarantee you that any other year, a normal election year, if there is such a thing, we wouldn't be seeing that kind of tight race right out of the gate. So there's going to be some big storylines out of tonight. It's not just about the balance of power shifting. Of course, this is the primaries. Those seats that can flip will come later in November. But we're going to learn a lot about voter frustration. I think this is, it's going to be an interesting night to watch.
The runoffs are set for August 28th. We'll do this all again on August 28th before the general election on November. We're going to go back to Caleb Branch at this point. Ben was alluding to how the voters felt. You were out amongst the voters today at the various polls. Who'd you speak with and what'd you hear?
Yeah, for sure. So I talked with multiple different voters out today, went to 3 different precincts. And basically what I heard was people were most concerned with the state question. Some people were telling me that they only came out to vote on that one specific issue. They left the rest of their ballot blank. I heard a lot of people in support of the state question saying that they really were concerned about the medical aspects, that they wanted to make sure that people were getting the medical care that they needed. Also, a lot of people pointed out the tax revenue, that it was going to be something that Oklahoma could get more money, we could fund education, and that's why they were in support of that. Also heard a lot of people talking about the governor race. The three main candidates, which we're seeing in the polling numbers tonight, Mitt Cornett, Kevin Stitt, and Todd Lamb. People had their own reasons for each. A lot of people were saying, I support Mitt Cornett. He was a good Oklahoma City governor. You see what he did with the area. And people talking about Todd Lamb, they mentioned some education initiatives that they were interested in. And with Kevin Stitt, a lot of people were saying he's the outsider. He's the one that's going to come in with the new blood and maybe shake some things up. And I think that's what voters are looking for.
Interesting. That's kind of how those guys campaigned, and that's what the voters heard and were repeating to Kayla as she was out there. Did you see busy polls?
I did see some busy polls. One of the locations was a little bit slower than the others, but I was surprised. Parking lots were full. People were in and out all day long.
Good stuff. Kayla Branch reporting from the various polling areas. Guys, we didn't talk too much about the state question earlier, but that was one of the big draws of today's voting.
Yeah, I mean, as Kayla said, a lot of voters, that's what they had in their mind when they went out there. I mean, this is a big issue. A majority of states in the country have medical marijuana of some kind.
2 years ago, the initiative petition, and finally going to the vote of the
yeah,
people
so
today.
this is going to be, this is going to be a big deal for the state, not just if it passes the introduction of medical marijuana, but this is going to put some work in the lap of the legislature, expected to come back for a special session this summer to try to kind of firm up some of those regulatory rules that are still yet to be decided.
And they'll have to come back very, very quickly the way the law is written now. They've got to start handing out these licenses within a month.
It's a story this gentleman, Dale Dunwalt, will be following fervently from the state capitol, his home away from home.
Yeah.
At least it feels that way, right?
It certainly is.
All right, Dale, Ben, Kayla, they will be back. We'll wrap it up at this point. More election coverage throughout the night, live coverage at 9 and 10 o'clock. You gotta love that music. Here on NewsOK.com, of course, complete report in tomorrow's editions of the Oklahoman as well.